There's been a lot of changes in the real estate industry lately, right? The biggest one is focused around commission. Some of you have heard the term NAR, which is National Association of Realtor. And really what we're looking at is the 6% commission and how agents are paid and things of that sort. Well, as a home buyer or home seller, what it really comes down to is how are you impacted? What does it mean to you? What new hurdles do you have to overcome and what's changing?
I think as an agent and as a lender, I think we have all struggled with this new, big scary NAR is going to change the world, or, this NAR development is changing everything, and now we can all do this. People are going to get shafted on this side. I have had a lot of conversations with people that have come up to me and said, oh, well, now I don't have to pay 6%. What are you going to do? Oh, now you're a buyer's agent. You're never going to work again because no one's going to pay you. And it's been very frustrating for me because being in the business and the industry as long as I've been, buyer's agency has always been a thing. All of these questions that people are asking, who's going to pay, who's going to do this, how's it going to look, that's never changed. We've had that form the entire time that I've had a license. So that's what's frustrating me is trying to explain nothing has actually changed. Right. It's just someone dropped a dynamic ball and you guys all think this is going to change the world.
Well, I mean, let's face it, the contract has always been negotiable. So the 6%, I mean, when the last time you seen a transaction where someone actually the seller paid 6%?
Well, and I remember when I first started, I wrote my first contract, 19 years ago. And when I wrote the contract, I remember it was this big scary thing, and it's like you have to get 6%, and the company requires you to do whatever. And I went in there, and I immediately thought this is ridiculous. I'm all hung up on forcing a number or asking for a certain percentage when I want to know about the house. I want to know what the client needs. I want to know what works for them. I gradually, I just did my thing, and it's like I approach every client with, what do you need? How much do you want to walk away from this? And then how do we make those numbers work? That's the only way it should ever have been. Now, taking away one side or the other, it's not taking away, it's actually causing, it is taking away, but it's taking away the things
it's causing more confusion for the consumer. Because really on our end, it's not much change. So really like looking from a seller perspective, right? So from a seller listing their home, one, it was always negotiable. Two, we have the percentage baked into the contract, right? So what percentage you're paying and where the percentages are going. So that's not changing. That's still in the contract, and it's never been mandatory. It's always been an option to.
Well, that's what kind of makes me giggle, because I think back to all the listing appointments I've gone on, all the deals I've done, and never once have I sat down and said, the first thing out of my mouth was, hey, I want this and I'm not working here if I don't get it.
Right.
It was always like, all right, I'm competing against certain people. This is what I offer. This is what I'm willing to do for you, and I'm worth it. This is why I'm worth it. These are my selling points, and I will get you what you need. I also have always started all my conversations with, let's cut to the chase about money and how you feel about whatever. What do you need to make? What's your financial situation coming to the table? Are you close to where you're breaking even right now? And I've always also said the bottom line for any real estate agent is when it comes down to the end of the wire and we get to closing day and this is where the numbers are. Oh crap, we have to have this, we have to have that. We take the hit. And if we aren't willing to negotiate that, then we are not going to be very successful. And it is why I have been, had the longevity that I've had. I've never ever looked at anything other than a negotiation.
Yep.
Right. So this surprises me that I want to know who these agents are that have commanded 6% and got it and it made everybody mad.
Right. And I think
like, who are they?
Right.
Because I didn't do that,
And I think that's the misconception, right? So when we look at the home seller and the process for them, and this is where the confusion comes in, because now they want to sit down, and we've heard it, well, I don't want to pay anything on the commission side. Okay, well, let's talk about what that looks like. Do you plan on buying a home after you sell this home? That's the first thing you want to look at, because now you've become the buyer.
Right.
And what does that look like?
Well, it's interesting because you and I have had some situations where we've talked about personal real estate things, changes that you guys are making. And we had the conversation, and she's like, well, we don't want to pay X for the whole deal. I'm like, okay, let's talk about that.
Right.
And we're like, all right, well, we're not going to pay X. You don't have to, but we are going to do this. And I even said the words, and we worked together very well. She's a friend too. I was like, I'm worth this.
Yep.
And I'm worth it. And she's like, oh, absolutely you are. But that's another caveat in all of this. A listing agent that's not experienced or doesn't have the tools,
Correct.
they're going to say anything, and that's going to cause another level of confusion. Because
Right.
you're going to have inexperienced agents who are going to then be put in the position in Colorado of transaction brokerage, in Illinois dual agency. And both of those are something that can be done well. It can also be the biggest issue you could ever have in your career.
Right.
You know, that's a
Well, and
fast
with that
way to.
being said, you know, your buyer pool is going to come down because of the fact that,
Bingo.
because if you as a seller doesn't say, you know what, well, I'll go ahead and give some towards the buyer's side
Right.
as a credit, then your pool is going to open up a
So
lot.
let's look at this statistic, right?
Oh,
so
that's a great one.
What did
That's a great
we
one.
see a statistic from NAR that 89% of buyers work with an agent. So now let's combine that with the fact that we're in a high rate environment, right? So we're in a high interest rate environment where homes are sitting, let's face it.
Yeah.
And now you want to throw in the fact that the seller may not want to pay commission.
Right.
Well, if 87% of buyers are using an agent that doesn't work for free,
Right.
then how are you cutting into that number on top of the number that's already reduced because of the high interest rate environment?
Exactly.
Well,
So-
and if you're dealing with a VA customer
Well,
that doesn't have the money to put down or to even give the money to
as of today,
agent.
under this concept of VA,
They
they're
can't.
not buying a house
Yeah, well, yeah.
without the seller contributing to their agent's commission. And that's today, right? We're looking
Right.
Yes.
forward to that changing,
Yes.
but
Right.
Yes.
that's the reality. So when you're looking at it from a seller perspective, it does create more confusion and more hurdles depending on the strategy from your agent and your team of how to approach it.
I think one thing everyone has to also look at, and John and I, talked about this last night. We were on a listing appointment, we're going in different neighborhoods. When we were discussing certain rates, certain pockets of business, trying to price, that's another thing, right? So pricing, you have a couple ways you can do it. You can try to price as closely to fair market value as you can and hope for the best. You can also then go a little bit lower and hope for multiple offers to push you where you want to be. And we talk about this a lot too. There are certain loans that when it comes to multiple offers, it's monopoly money.
Yes.
They can write and say whatever because if the appraisal doesn't come in, it really doesn't matter. So you can't just look at a house and say, I think it can be this, and let's price it low, and hopefully you still have to have it appraised. On the flip side of that coin, you have to look at where the prices are sitting, the high ones that you want to go with, and you have to look at the days on market. And it's like, okay, do you want to wait for this? And you're still going to get less. Then you factor in, okay, you want competing market, all these multiple listing things to come, and you want to get, buyer pool, and you're going to bring all this price up, but I'm not going to pay you to do it. I personally am not motivated by not working or by working and not getting paid. I'm not a big fan. But I've also always thought too, the amount of just one listing that we put in, going back and forth with the numbers, diving in, digging, looking at different things, specifically picking, driving the neighborhood. Who is going to do that for you? Are you going to do that for yourself? When the appraisal comes and you don't have representation, who's going to talk to the appraiser?
Well, and I think that's, again, things that are overlooked, right? So we may hear, oh, well, I'll just go have an attorney draw up the contract.
Oh, yeah, that's my favorite.
Great. Okay,
Yeah.
go do that. Because the attorney is going to have you paid by the hour. They're not going to advise you on price point. They're not going to advise you on the market. They're not going to strategize with you.
Yeah.
They're not going to talk to the appraiser when
They're
your
not going to
home
pull
gets
comps.
undervalued.
And when it's undervalued, they're like, yeah, whatever.
Right. So
You know?
all they're literally doing, you're paying them more money just to literally push a paper. So sometimes we forget what it takes to get a home to market in the right manner. Right. And even when you're looking at an agent, if their commission is 1%, a seller should ask themselves, well, what am I missing out on working with the 1% versus the 2.5 or 3% or whatever the other number may be, right? Because something's missing in that equation for those prices to be off. So
That's the main thing. I think the reality is that our market is going to continue to function as it has always functioned, and this dust will settle a little bit. I think there's going to be a lot more confusion based on the fact that nobody knows who can come in and write an offer, or someone's going to think, okay, but here's the better part. These people who are willing to take whatever listing and do it for whatever price point, and they're satisfied and they don't care how that comes on the buyer side, haven't thought through dual agency. Because when someone comes there not represented, are you willing to put your license on the line and risk all the legalities of not getting very much on this side, and you're taking the one for the team, the whole team?
Well, and the fact is, when someone is unrepresented on the buyer side, the percentage of that deal falling through is like 10x. When you have a buyer's agent, from my perspective, what happens is once we're under contract and we've figured out the price, collectively the group works together as a team
Yep.
to get
Exactly.
the group to close.
that's
right.
If this person comes because we're not paying commission on the listing side and they're unrepresented, and you won't allow me to essentially become a transaction broker, I have to stay
in
on your
lane,
side,
right?
then what do you think? That deal's likely not gonna come
When-
through. They're gonna miss deadlines. They're not gonna communicate
Right.
with the lender. How are they
Right.
going to set up the inspection, right? So
Mhm.
there's things that have to get done in the contract. But
I think really in conclusion, and what I would like to say is that when you are contemplating listing your home, think about the whole picture. And instead of thinking, I only have to get this and I can make this much more money, think about a number you're comfortable with, making sure the whole deal works like it's supposed to
Right.
go. You never have to look at 6% again. You can look at whatever percentage you look at, as long as it's an easy enough thing to split with the other side so that you can do the proper job to get you the most money at closing
Right.
when the deal comes
So-
together.
Right.
so as we cross over to the buyer side, there's a mesh in the middle. And what we've noticed is the seller that thinks they're not going to offer commission and get top market value, and the buyer that thinks that, well, since I don't have an agent and they're not paying commission, I'm going to get a better deal. There's a gap between
Right.
between the two,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like-
And then throw in the fact that there's no one leading both sides.
Right.
There's no one communicating with the lender. If there's documentation missing, there's no one but that person to hound them. I mean, we do that. We spend a lot of time. How much do you and I communicate
Oh, yeah.
on the
Daily.
buyers? We're
Yeah.
missing every day.
Yep.
Did you get this?
Right.
Did you get this? Did you get
Did you
I
get
need
the
this
sign?
sign. I need
Right.
this
Did you
sign.
get
Is this
this?
sign? Is
Yes.
this sign? That's what we bring to the table.
So-
And a lot of the deals will not go through.
So, and the bottom line is, we're going to end up where we are at the end of
We
the
are.
day, right?
In the nutshell, we're gonna have this convoluted system for a while. Everyone's gonna be confused.
Mhm.
But in reality, the very simple thing is figure out what number works for you.
Right.
Put that number on there, split that number, or
Right.
however you want to do it.
And
Some
the
is better
appraiser-
than none. And then have the people in place to make the deal go together the way
Right.
it's always
Right.
done.
And the appraiser is going to try to strive to get that number of the purchase contract if
Yes.
it's
If
feasible.
it's
Yes.
feasible.
If
If
they
it's
can,
not,
if they
yes.
can find the comps that are in the area, then they'll definitely,
Right.
try to get that value.
Right.
Right.
So
So-
the seller's always going to want top dollar, and the buyer's always going to want best deal.
Right.
And the only way we get them together is by representation.
The bottom line is communication is the key. And whether you're working with us or you're working with someone else, that person should be able to sit down and have a conversation like we've just had, discussing all these options and the benefits, and it's always negotiable. Keep that in mind. Everything is negotiable, and there should not be any hostility or issue around that fact. I'm Deanne Airy, this is John Nichols, and we're the Airy Nichols Group.